Guys, this is Stacy Rossetti, and I am back again with another badass women real estate investor. I want to go ahead and introduce everybody to Jade. And Jade, introduce yourself. Kind of tell everybody your experiences.
Sure. Thank you so much, Stacy. I always love connecting on things like this because there are a lot of really dynamic women in the real estate world. So I'm excited to be here. As you mentioned, my name's Jade Koch, and I've been in the real estate world for about, I'll say 2 years, but really it's about 4, but 2 years of actually taking action on things and being part of projects. And my background is Airbnbs. And I say that lightly because it's a lot of things, but Airbnb was really what has kind of taken me by storm and contributed to the lifestyle that I have now and has kind of connected me with the other areas of real estate. And so my beginning of real estate was a little bit interesting. I had originally started wanting to do some tiny houses development. And, just with the restrictions that the community that I was in at the time, it was taking a really long time. And so that's why I say 2 years of not really doing it, but kind of doing it. And finally, I came across my now boyfriend and business partner. So be careful who you work with. And so we actually started doing Airbnbs in Scottsdale, Arizona. And that turned into us actually traveling full time from Scottsdale and getting Airbnbs along the way. So in the United States, throughout Canada, and then eventually heading down to Costa Rica and getting places there and a hotel there. And really Airbnb kind of followed us as we went, or maybe we followed our Airbnbs. I'm not sure which one. But so my life has really become connected to the real estate world, to connect with other women. And I'm excited to share a little bit more about it on the call with you.
Okay, awesome. I love it. So tell me a little bit about how, like, your first couple of deals and how you got started.
Yeah, so the first one was a really unique one. I think everyone's first deal is the most memorable. But so at the time, I was actually working full time, and I was working at a nonprofit that worked with at-risk and vulnerable youth. And that's kind of how the tiny house concept started, and wanting to provide alternative living options. And at the time, I was connected with my now boyfriend and business partner, Tyler, and he had gone down to Scottsdale. And he said, you got to come down here. Like, it's amazing. It's such a dynamic place. You got to come down and see what we're doing. So I thought, okay, I'll come. And so 2 weeks later, I'd flown down to Scottsdale. And within that first week of being there was actually when we went and looked at a place, acquired it, because we do rental arbitrage. So instead of buying something, we're leasing someone's place and turning it into an Airbnb. And that's how easy it was. So I was down there for 7 days and got the first property. And when I flew back, I was sitting on the plane, and if truth be told, while I was down there, I already knew I was moving. But I was on the plane and I was like, okay, you know what? That happened really quickly. If we can do it that quick, how can I do it the next time? So we got this really fantastic place. It was an apartment in a really great area, right close to Old Town Scottsdale, for those of you who are familiar with it. And so the first month we had profited almost $2,000 off of it. And so as soon as that kind of came in, I was like, whoa, that's pretty competitive with what my job is giving. What if I just get more? And so that's really what was the catalyst of me coming back and saying, you know what, I need to switch. I like my job, but I didn't love my life. What can I do different? And Airbnb was that different. So within the month, I had actually quit my job. I had actually ended a relationship at the time as well, and had sold everything I owned, what every classic 22-year-old does, sold everything they owned. And I actually booked a one-way flight down to Los Angeles with my little dog and my suitcase, because that's all I had left. And I was committed to making Airbnb happen. So really that first deal in Scottsdale in less than a week, and profiting as much as we did, was kind of the catalyst of let's keep going. Let's keep doing this.
I love it. So what happened after that then?
Yeah. So what happened? A very exciting journey. So when I got down to LA, we stuck around there for a little bit and decided, Scottsdale worked out really well. Let's head back to Scottsdale, get a few more units. So we did. We had about 5 or 6 down there. And then we decided, okay, we've kind of done our time here. And we'd been down there long enough that, being Canadian citizens, we had to come back to Canada at some point. So we decided to do the Route 66 drive up to Toronto, which was beautiful, very long, but beautiful, a lot to see. And we're like, okay, let's try it here. And so Toronto was a very dynamic market. Learned a lot we were there for a month, and we got beat up a little, I'm not going to lie. But what we decided to do was get resourceful. And if Toronto wasn't working, where else could we get? So actually, while we were there, we were able to get a property in Ottawa, which I've never even been to Ottawa, but that's the power of Airbnb, that you can get them in places you've never been before. Mm-hmm. And so we were able to get a place in Ottawa. And at the time, we're like, okay, let's switch markets. So on our drive back, we were like, okay, let's go to Calgary, the next big city in Canada, which there isn't that many of them. But we're like, let's go to the next big city. And on the way there, we had secured another property that we had never seen. And it was under the conditions of, hey, you know, we really like this unit. We want to do Airbnb out of it. Can we secure your spot? And then once we get there, officially sign everything and make sure everything's good. So we arrived in Calgary and showed up there. We had our unit. We set it up within 2 days. We lived in it for a few more while we got the second unit there. And then we had our Airbnb. And then we had the second Airbnb, and then we got the third Airbnb. And it was really just a chance. Once you get one, you realize how easy the second ones are. But the first one's absolutely daunting. But so from there, we just kept getting them. You know, every week or so, we would get another one and add it to the portfolio. And pretty soon, you know, the properties that we were getting, they were profiting, I would say on average, because highs and low season, it was about $800 a month per property. So that began to subsidize our traveling, because where we wanted to travel is where we get our Airbnb. And then when we wanted to travel somewhere else, it was okay because our Airbnbs were making money for us when we weren't staying at them. So that's when, if you want me to dive into how we ended up in Costa Rica, I can dive into that.
I was going to ask real fast before we get started going deeper into everything, what is arbitrage? What is Airbnb arbitrage? And kind of get into that a little bit.
Great question. So Airbnb arbitrage is how we do the Airbnbs. And what that looks like is, instead of purchasing a property, you know, signing for a mortgage or, you know, putting down payments on, instead, we're taking someone else who already has an existing property, whether it's a house or apartment or tiny house or whatever it is, someone already owns it. We rent it from them, and then we sublease it and we put it on Airbnb. So we remain as their core tenants. So they still get their long-term tenant, but then we then become the host of our Airbnb. So people still come and they stay. And one of the reasons why we got into this version of it was because when I first got started in real estate, I wasn't in a position to purchase anything, right? You know, there's a lot of upfront costs. I didn't really have the confidence to do that. And so doing it this way, most people have rented at some point in their lives, and it's very similar. You're just signing that regular lease. And so you don't have those high upfront costs. You don't really take on that much risk. You just sign your lease and then you set it up to become an Airbnb. So in a brief form, that's what it is. It's signing a lease and it's setting it up for an Airbnb and renting it out to other people.
So why were you, like, explain to everybody, why were you having trouble, for instance, in Toronto versus like Ottawa?
Yes. So what we've kind of been seeing, which is a trend over the last few years since Airbnb has really taken off, is that some areas are really Airbnb friendly, and their city regulations or their state regulations have been either pro Airbnb and short-term rental or con Airbnb short-term rental. And Toronto was one of those places where at the time when we went, it was pro Airbnb and you could do it. Toronto is a very expensive market as well. And so what kind of happened during that time was, as people were also getting Airbnb properties, their housing market went like this. And they pretty much became unaffordable for the average person to live in, because whoever had an Airbnb property was making really good money on it. But it changed the market that people who were living there for personal reasons couldn't afford to be there. So during that time, and actually the month to follow, Toronto switched their Airbnb regulations, and now it had to be your core residents, and there was A, B, and C that had to be met. Okay. And so for the average person who didn't want to live there, but just wanted to have an investment property, it was really, really difficult. Whereas Scottsdale, for example, their state, Arizona as a whole, is very Airbnb friendly. And so it's encouraged, and there's lots of options, and the regulations are really easy to navigate. And same with Calgary. Calgary is a very Airbnb friendly place to be. And so every building itself can be different, but when you're working with the city instead of against them is really what changed it. So Toronto was really working against it, where Scottsdale, Calgary, we were working with them because they were happy to have those short-term rental options.
Now, when you put them under, when you do like a lease on them, are they usually like vacant properties? And then you just go in and then you put the furniture in?
Yep. For sure. Two different routes of going about it is an empty property that you sign the lease and you furnish it and design it, decorate it, do what you want to do with it. Or the second route about going about that is if it's a nice enough place and they actually already have furnishings in there, perfect, right? Then it saves you those upfront costs. And so that was how the first one went, was that we didn't have to put excessive amounts of money into it to furnish it because it already had furnishings. So it made it, a lot easier to start and to scale when all you have to pay is rent and maybe a damage deposit or adding a few other things. So absolutely, they can be vacant and furnish them, which I do love doing, but it's great for financials if something's already furnished in a way that has a high enough standard for Airbnb that they've already done your job for you.
Mm-hmm. How do you usually find these properties?
Same way you'd go to look for a personal property. It's on the Zillows, it's on Rent Faster, it's on, I'll say Craigslist, but Craigslist is also a buyer beware of things. But on those online platforms that people are just listing their average place, because really what we became was someone's ideal tenant, right? For a few reasons. They're looking for someone to be in long term. We want to be in there long term. So we fill their occupancy. We're also doing it on a professional level, right? So they're getting the rent guaranteed every month. And there's many pros to having an Airbnb arbitrage in your unit is that, when you have someone full time, you're cooking, you're cleaning, you're doing your laundry, you're, 3 meals a day, you're spending all your time there. And so there's wear and tear on the property when someone's living there full time, right? With an Airbnb arbitrage, when people are on vacation, they're not really cooking 3 meals a day, right? They're not doing laundry consecutively. And so really what the pro there is that they don't have people who are wearing on their appliances and wearing on the unit, right? So it's all about that communication with the landlord of that we really are becoming your ideal tenant. It's being cleaned after every single guest, where goodness knows there's those tenants where I'm sure haven't cleaned for the duration of their entire stay there, right?
Exactly,
So
yes.
we really kind of come with a different approach to being a tenant, but also a different standard of being a tenant. So, I'm not going to say this was something that every single landlord was on board with, because that wasn't the case. It was still a really new way of renting. And, they preferred to have just one person in it, which was fine. And so it was really just about, navigating the right units, approaching with the landlord, and making sure they were going to be in areas that were going to be profitable, right? Downtown, or, close to an entertainment center or the beach, or, whatever it is that's going to attract tenants. And we found them online, just like every other rental.
Mm-hmm. I love it. I love it so much. Definitely thinking outside the box, I think, which is very important right now, especially. So tell me, how did you get into Costa Rica? Tell me the whole Costa Rica story here.
Yeah, so at this point, we were getting pretty good at traveling out of one suitcase. And, we had done the Route 66, so we had seen a lot of the states, and we had driven from Toronto to Calgary, which we'd seen a lot of Canada. And at the time, my boyfriend and business partner, he had gone to Costa Rica, I think 2 years prior, with a previous business partner who wasn't in the picture anymore. And he had this goal of getting a hotel down there. And I had been to Costa Rica a few years before that. And when he said that, I was like, oh, I love it. And actually, when he was working with the previous business partner, I was always like, you know what, I want to be involved in this somehow, because we knew each other before. And so one day we just said, why don't we go to Costa Rica? Like, let's make it happen. And so 3 weeks, well, we booked our flight about a week later, and we just said, let's just pick a date. And we randomly said August 9th. And so we flew out on August 9th, 3 weeks later, and we showed up, and we realized when we got there, we're like, we don't really know anyone here. We also don't speak Spanish. So, maybe we didn't think this through enough. But when we got down there, Costa Rica, for anyone who has been or hasn't been, is one of the most incredible places in the world. The people are unbelievably friendly. Thankfully, a lot of them know English. So that made it easier. But really what we decided, we're like, you know what, if we're doing the real estate thing, if we want to be traveling, let's make it work where we continue to travel and we continue to do the real estate thing. And it worked this far with other Airbnb properties. So why can't it work here? So we went down to Costa Rica, and the only person we knew was one realtor. And so we connected with him, but we weren't living in the same place. And really, it was a chance for us to just kind of explore and be tourists and be like, okay, what do we want to see? And then what that did was allow us a chance to, okay, if we want to see it, I bet other people want to see it. So we really gravitated to those tourist spots, which happened to be little beach towns outside of the big cities. And we're like, all right, let's do something here. There's a lot of opportunity. People are coming. Prices were extremely affordable, right, from what we were used to in North America. And as we were doing analysis of the areas down there, there was some profit to be made. There was a lot of opportunity for us to connect. And what was also was that, what we didn't want to do was just go down there and disrupt everything. What we wanted to do was go down there, see what the area brought and how could we contribute to it. And so we actually made some incredible partnerships with local people. And what we realized was a lot of them were actually disconnected and didn't learn how to do Airbnb properly or how to host on these other platforms, and relied a lot on, once people got there, word of mouth and signage. And so we built some really wonderful partnerships with locals, and they then said, hey, rent our units. We would love that, right? So once we built those relationships and realized the market was there, we were able to scale really quickly, and we were able to actually get properties in about 4 or 5 different markets throughout Costa Rica. And eventually we actually were able to get a hotel down there too, which was the whole reason we went down there. Was at the time we wanted to purchase a hotel. And if Airbnb arbitrage taught us anything, it was that, it's easier to rent something than to buy. And so we were fortunate to come across another couple, a local couple, who had this wonderful hotel right by the beach. I had actually drawn out exactly, this is the power manifestation. I had drawn out what I wanted us to create down there. And this hotel was about 99% it. So we showed up and I was like, did this drawing come to life? It was very weird. I still have the drawings. And so it was a really wonderful chance for us to actually rent out the hotel. And we didn't know that was an option down there. We're doing this with condos or we're doing this with houses, but can you really rent out a hotel? And the answer was yes. And we did. And it was really wonderful. And so, just to kind of give that at a 10 foot, it really looked like us getting Airbnbs down there. And then we were able to get the hotel down there too.
So with the hotel, it was like the owners just like, I really don't want to run this anymore, or kind of what was their story?
Exactly. So they were still a younger couple, but they were, mid-40s, but they'd been doing it for a little while already. They'd been doing it for like 12 years at the time. Okay. And they had said, we love it, but we'd also love to not have to do it anymore too. And so that's when we had just had a really open conversation of, this is where we're at. And so they said, yep, they get to keep their asset and they get to make about what they were making before from what we were renting it from. And we were able to come in, and we had made a partnership with them that we had actually done some renovations to the hotel as well to kind of bring it up to a bit more of an appealing or captivating dynamic place where people want to go to. And so it really became a partnership with them of, let's rent your spot. We'll put in some work into it and build it up together. And then at the end of it, they were also open to selling too. So we went into it with the intent of, we might buy this at the end, right? Let's see how this term goes, and then we might buy it. And so, the world works in mysterious ways, because we went down to Costa Rica in 2019, and we all know what happened in 2020 was COVID, right? So we had the hotel, we had all of our places, they were up and running. And our launch, just to dive into things a little more, because this is when, things change very quickly, is that we had our launch on March 17th. Costa Rica government decided that group gatherings were no longer available March 16th. Oh my God. So we had been in operation for 3 months already, which it was great and wonderful. And we met people from around the world, and we wouldn't change that for the world. But what came next was a huge turn of, I'm sure, what every single real estate investor or people in the world felt. But that was a big turning point for us too.
Yeah. So then what? So then basically y'all just said, okay, let me just we'll just not do this anymore, come back and then see come back and see if we can do it afterwards, or?
Yeah, so kind of a middle mark of that. So we had actually held on to it for a little while, and we had full intentions of staying in Costa Rica. We're like, let's just ride this out. We'll ride it out together. We're having conversations with the owners too. And we said, let's just kind of be flexible here. And things happen in Costa Rica a lot later than they did everywhere else in the world. So we were kind of watching from, the back seats of what was going on. And so we had full intentions of staying. And then things happened really quickly again, that at the end of March, it was March 28th. And that's when things changed for the visa. So to be in Costa Rica, you can only be there 90 days at a time. They're very flexible with that. You can go down to Panama or you come back and your 90 days resets.
Mhm.
And so since we weren't able to travel to a spot and come to renew the visa, they had made flexibility of that. You didn't have to reset your visa. You could just stay. But what we couldn't do was drive. And so we couldn't rent a vehicle. We couldn't do all these other things that were kind of required to live down there. And then really the catalyst of that was that healthcare changed. So we wouldn't have access to healthcare if something were to happen. And so within 24 hours, we were actually on the very last flight that was leaving Costa Rica back to Canada extremely unexpectedly. And so what 48 hours before that looked like was, we'll ride it out, we'll figure things out, we're good. To 24 hours later, we're like, okay, we're not good. We're on a plane back now. So what does this look like? So we did still ride it out for a little while, but that was the beauty in doing the Airbnb arbitrage route, was that all it really took, and I'm not going to say all it really took, I guess there was a lot of process to it, but really we were able to transition out because owners still were able to own their place. We ended our lease terms and we weren't on the hook for thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars that we would have had to still commit to if we owned all these properties around the world, right? So we were able to say to every connection we were with, this is where we're at. They fully understood because they knew what we were doing. And I would say, there was some stress from some of the landlords, but for the most part, it was absolutely, we understand. Let us know when you're back. We want to welcome you too, because everyone was kind of feeling that at the time. And so this route, we were able to say, you know what, let's transition for what we know we can. And we've been back in Canada since. We still have wonderful connections with everyone in Costa Rica, and we're really excited to go back. But we said what it also taught us was, now we have a lot more in-depth projects that are starting in Calgary and have started. And, in January alone, we've got 22 rental properties that are starting up. We now are acquiring 22 properties in Calgary, in a very different market than Costa Rica. But what COVID taught us was that there can be dynamics that come into play of being resourceful in what your markets can be and being able to pivot of what that looks like. Because what we also saw was that tourism didn't stop. Our Airbnb properties were still thriving, honestly, during COVID too, in the places that weren't tourist destinations. So what we decided to pivot on and realize was, let's still focus on those markets that were doing really well, because people still need to travel for a variety of reasons. We can be able to host them when they're there. So we've been able to make some really exceptional relationships with some builders and developers in Calgary. And we have, 22 units currently committed to for January, and actually another 40 approximately that seem to be up the pipeline coming right after that. So there's a lot of opportunity that we've connected with and been able to negotiate some really spectacular things. And all of that came from what we hadn't expected previously, right? Of the end of something else was the beginning of something new. And so we were just taking it head on, and we've decided to, let's roll with it, right? I think that was maybe a theme throughout the year for a lot of people of, let's just go with things, see what happens. And so this year's ending very differently than it began, and next year is beginning differently than the last year. But we're excited for, the future of Airbnb and the future of short-term rentals and real estate as a whole. There's a lot of opportunity.
I love that too, because, I traveled for 4 months this year across the country. And honestly, there were not enough Airbnbs out there.
Right.
And then they were charging like arm and legs because there wasn't.
Yeah.
It would be like ridiculous prices and stuff. So I definitely think that we need more Airbnbs, especially now that people are really going to be traveling within the country, right? They're not leaving a lot, they're staying here in these areas.
And that's the thing, on a local level, there's a lot of really wonderful things to see and experience. And now more than ever, just like you mentioned, people are focusing on that. And so they're traveling local, which contributes to our local economies right now. And so if we're able to provide those unique experiences, what it does is it benefits everyone, right? People get to still go and explore in a safe way while things are staying within, local grounds too. So absolutely, travel changed, yes, but it did not disappear by any means.
I agree. I totally agree. So for people that, want to get into arbitrage, what would you give them a couple of tips?
Absolutely. So the first things first would be, check out what areas you're close to because it is something you can do in your backyard. The second would to be, navigate if there's anyone else who's doing it in those areas. Because if you can find other people who are doing it, typically you can see what they're up to too. Connect with other people in the real estate world because that was the catalyst of us really being able to build those relationships. Real estate is on relationships. And the third one would be go take action, go do it, right? Because what holds a lot of people back is the fear of the unknown. And absolutely that's valid. But, diving into things, it's a lot lower risk than many other forms of real estate. And so be in a position that financially you're able to do that, but that it's not gonna hold you back from trying it. So, do your research on what areas allow it, explore what options are available in your area, connect with other people in real estate. Feel free to reach out if I can answer any questions, and just take action, dive into it.
I love it. Okay, so tell everybody how they can get a hold of you if you want to, on Facebook or whatever you're on right now.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a few groups. So for my women in the group, which I love, I have a women specific Invest Her group. So it's called Airbnb Invest Her, the millennial investor on Facebook. And we also have another really dynamic group, and it's called the Kick Crew, Key Investment and Cash Flow Knowledge. And it's all things real estate, heavy influence on Airbnb as well. And that's for anyone to join. So feel free to look those up on Facebook. Join the groups, they're free to join. We post a lot of training for other people who want to get started as well. And I'm also on Instagram at Life of Jade. So feel free to, connect with me on there too. And I'm always happy to connect with other incredible women who are doing big things because there's a lot of them.
Awesome. Well, that was amazing. Yeah. So I wish you the best. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. And I'm sure a lot of people will get a lot out of that and hear your story and just kind of get inspired, honestly.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It was great to connect with you too. And actually, so within She School, what I also do, I have a feature, I do a She School show every Wednesday. And so I showcase other women who are doing really dynamic things. And actually, I'd love to have you on it to share about your journey too, if that's something you're open to.
Of course. I would love that. We should totally do that.
Great. Okay. I'll send you some information.
And I want you to speak at the Badass Women Summit.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, so that's the end of January. So it's called the Badass Women Real Estate Investors Virtual Summit.
Perfect. Yes, let me know. I'm happy to be connected. I'm glad you and I are connected and look forward to staying connected too.
Yes, definitely. Okay, cool. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for hanging out with us, and everybody else, I will see you guys at the next video. Okay.